For a while now, I've been talking about the dangers of population collapse, but when I looked into the Mexico statistics, which is where I'm from and where I live, even I was shocked because I didn't know them. So let's see what's going on. Please be one of our first 1,000 subscribers and help us reach monetization. For the longest time, Mexico has been considered a country of youth, a vibrant nation with a young population, large families and very family-oriented, and a culture bursting with energy. But this view is quickly deteriorating, and it seems not even us as Mexicans are aware of the incoming crisis that is at our door. A demographic shift is rewriting Mexico's future as it also consumes other countries in more obvious ways like Japan, South Korea, and China, but it's a global problem caused by global forces. It all starts with a single, stunning number here in Mexico. In 2024, the total number of births in Mexico fell by about 2.4 to 1.78 million. And that number of babies born was its lowest level in 65 years, even though Mexico has more than 3 times the population today that it had in 1960. And all indications are that this number will continue to trend lower. Mexico is now a country in a demographic downward spiral, and it's happening faster than almost anyone realizes or even cares about. Mexico's current birth rate in 2025 is about 70% lower than back in 1950. We have started to grow old almost overnight. To understand how shocking this collapse is, we have to understand the boom that came before it. For most of the 20th century, Mexico was the textbook example of a high-growth nation. The population skyrocketed from just 27 million in 1950 to over 100 million by 2001. This explosion was in part fueled by sky-high fertility rates, and of course, religious encouragement. In the 1960s, the Mexican average woman had about 6.8 children during her lifetime. But as often happens, the government, with the global elite whispering in its ear, worried about providing services for this exploding population, and so it did something that was remarkably effective. That started back in 1970. It launched one of the world's most successful state-led family planning campaigns and propaganda. If you'd like to know the ins and outs of how the US government had a big role in this, and well, just let me know and I can do another video about the infamous Kissinger report, but let's just say the Mexican government didn't plan or do this by itself, or even finance it by itself. Through education, access to contraception, and a push for abortion, the culture shifted dramatically. In 3 decades, Mexico's fertility rate plummeted by nearly 60%, falling from 6.5 in 1970 to just 2.7 by the year 2000. For a while, it seemed that Mexico had a perfect balance, with a young workforce and a manageable growth rate. But the forces of modernity and ideology, once unleashed, didn't stop at their planned target. The downward trend continued slowly at first, and then accelerated, and then took a nosedive. And the worst part of it is, I don't see many publications, mainstream media, the government, anybody really talking about this here in Mexico locally, much less anywhere else around the world. Today, Mexico's national fertility rate has plummeted to around 1.87 children per woman, a number that is below the 2.1 replacement level needed to sustain the population. The engine of this collapse is a phenomenon gripping all of Latin America and, well, really almost all of the world. I'd recommend watching the documentary Birth Gap: A Childless World by Stephen J. Shaw. I even reviewed it a few years ago when it first came up and stirred a lot of controversy when they published it. And there's also the rapid, relentless urbanization, always seen as progress until it's too late and it has reared its ugly and true colors. As Mexico has moved from the countryside to the cities in search of opportunity, with promises of progress, they have walked into a new economic reality that is fundamentally hostile to having children. And my best advice will always continue to be, get out of cities before they suck your soul and your opportunities to have a truly fulfilling life. Today, about 88% of Mexico's population live in urban areas, up from less than 60% in the 1970s. And nowhere is this trend more extreme than Mexico City, where Guy and I currently live. The capital of Mexico has become ground zero for the demographic crisis. It is a massive city of culture and opportunity, and one of the reasons why Mexico has always been considered to be pretty densely populated, but it is also crushingly expensive for the average Mexican who moves here. and nobody tells them that. The cost of living, especially housing, has made starting a family financially impossible for millions. And I mean, that is essentially the story for any modern-day big capital city, and yet we continue encouraging our young people to move to these, promising them something that doesn't exist. The result is an incredibly low fertility rate within Mexico City specifically, especially from what we've believed for so long. It's almost absolutely unbelievable if it weren't true. As of 2023, the total fertility rate in Mexico City is estimated to be just 0.96%. 0.96%. And that number has been falling rapidly with nearly 30% decline in just the last 5 years. That's a shockingly low number for any country, to contrast the very publicized rate of Tokyo, Japan, for example, being 0.99, and Seoul, South Korea, having had a 3.6 birth rate increase in the last few years thanks to big efforts made by the people and the government after much panic, which you've probably already heard about, but nothing about Mexico City. At 0.96, Mexico City's fertility rate is now lower than Tokyo's, and it's lower than pretty much any major city in Spain or Italy, where they're now panicking as well. It's one of the lowest fertility rates of any major metropolitan area on Earth, and it's a prime example of intense economic pressure with urban life, and I'll say it once again, get out of cities. And now this acts as perhaps the most powerful and unavoidable contraceptive. Between 2016 and 2024, the average cost of rent or to buy an apartment in Mexico City has more than doubled, and I'm sure you've seen news of all the protests and violent protests regarding gentrification and against gringos in Mexico City, and yet the anger has been largely misplaced towards the wrong issue. Most of the real issue is with construction permits, investment in badly built real estate, and incentives from the government itself to bring in more people into the city itself. All of this while salaries in Mexico City went up only 10.5% between 2017 and 2024. So there is a massive financial barrier just to find a room to put a child in and to live with your own child. So if we want to understand why there was a 30% decline in Mexico City's fertility rate, we have to look at the doubling of housing costs in the last 8 years, but also an ideological narrative that has become more and more driven by feminism, environmentalism, and a lot of imported ideologies that have already ruined many other cities and countries. But Mexico's story also has a twist that makes it even more unique. Its own demographic decline is also colliding with its historic role as a giant in the world for migration. For decades, this was a one-way story. Mexicans left for the United States in search of work, and more recently, many also to take advantage of some of the work that is being held within the gigantic network of organized crime. This flow has been massive and was massive for many years, shaping both countries for about half a century. As of 2023, nearly 11 million immigrants in the US were born in Mexico, with our people leaving a country that has been mismanaged, corrupted, and forgotten by those who could potentially still fix it. And while that's not their own fault, well, we could use some help back over here in Mexico. But then again, today, that one-way street has become much more chaotic. Mexico is no longer just a country where people leave. It has become increasingly a corridor for the entire Western Hemisphere. Asylum applications in Mexico exploded in recent years, where they were just about 1,300 in 2013, but now are 140,000 as of 2023, a 108% time increase in 10 years, with the top applicants coming from Honduras, Haiti, and Cuba. And in a surprising twist, Mexico has also become a destination country itself. It's not just a transit zone. High-skilled workers, digital nomads, and Americans and Canadians attempting to escape their own ideologically globalized disasters are coming here only to soon find it's attempting to copy the hellholes they just escaped. It's now estimated that 1.6 million US citizens live in Mexico, making it the largest American expat community in the world. So, this collision of forces, a collapsing birth rate, massive migration, and a new wave of immigration is happening just as Mexico is starting to age. And that image of a young country is very much disappearing. The median age in Mexico has risen from 22 years old in the year 2000 to around 30 today, and is projected to hit 42 by 2050. The shift in Mexico's age structure means an increased dependency of retirees on the working age population in the coming years. This is something that the Mexican youth, who have been fear-mongered and indoctrinated about climate change and unsustainable populations and feminist liberation, still spits out at me today when I try to explain the problem to them. But they seem to forget that Mexico doesn't provide universal coverage of social security benefits, and less than half of its labor force is covered by a pension or any kind of retirement plan. The consequences of this are rapid aging and bearing down on a country that is not economically prepared for it. The pension and healthcare systems that were built for a demographic pyramid with a wide base of young workers and supporting a small number of retirees has now completely shifted. Now the number of Mexicans over the age of 60 is set to increase dramatically from 6.3% of the population in 2010 to around 23% by 2050. Meanwhile, the number of young people entering the workforce each year is shrinking due to the birth rate collapse, while at the same time, the country loses many of its citizens to immigration. This creates a looming labor shortage that could stifle economic growth for decades, and young Mexicans seem to now care more about themselves than their aging families, and even than about themselves in the future when it will become unsustainable to guarantee they'll have any form of assistance. And I think it's important to drive hard on that point because, once again, a lot of Mexican youth will just come up with excuses as to, oh, there's too many people already on the planet, or it's not good for the environment. But if they understood that this meant that their own economic opportunities are fast dwindling, mostly because of their own decisions as well, then maybe they changed their minds. McKinsey already warned that the slow growth of Mexico's working age population is a significant long-term risk to the country's economic growth in the future, and yet our feminist government seems to be very proud to continue to fearmonger, destroy religion, and indoctrinate the youth, particularly young women, into being liberated and free without telling them that they're dooming themselves and the country in the process. A lot of propaganda, a lot of indoctrination, and not much truth in all of the things they espouse. So Mexico's future is very much a nation at a demographic crossroads, unlike any nation on Earth. It must somehow manage its own rapidly aging and declining workforce while also acting as a primary transit valve for migration pressures from all across Latin America. It is a country that is losing its own people, opening the door to other people, and getting older, all at the same time. The downward spiral is not just a forecast, it's a reality unfolding further with each passing day. The story of Mexico is now following that of countries that it once admired and strived to emulate, only to now find itself going through the same catastrophe that doomed those other countries. A new and far more complex and deeply uncertain chapter has begun, written by the globalist forces it allowed itself to follow, and now confronted with the math of its own demographic decline. So there you have it. I bet not even you knew that this was going on in Mexico when we talk about the declining populations of Japan and South Korea. Apparently, we should have been focusing as well on Mexico. And before you go, please don't forget to like and subscribe and help us reach that 1,000 initial subscribers.